Welcome, everybody, to Finding Hermes. I hope you're ready to put all your cards down on the table and be transparent to the transcendent, because this is the age of Hermes. And as we're finding out, 2021 is going to be as exciting as 2020. So in this age of Hermes, the religion of the mind, as Gary Lachman called it, is more important than ever to delve into who we are. And yes, a little bit of a break because of the holidays, but we are back and we shall continue to have some excellent content. With us, we have the pleasure of being joined by Lachlan Franquemont. Lachlan, how are you? And thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I'm pretty good, Miguel. I'm excited about this. Really haven't done many podcasts about this, so I'm looking forward to getting it out there.
Yes. Love your work and what you're doing. And it's excellent that you are a scholar, you're a scientist, you are a seeker of higher truths. I guess we can call you a mystic, and you are in recovery. So you're like the full package.
I'm also a soldier, by the way. That was actually my first role out of high school, was in the Army. And I was a combat engineer. Served in the first Gulf War, right on the tip of the spear for the 7th Corps invading Iraq. We literally put in the central lanes in my task force for the entire 7th Corps as we went in there. And I periodically still do work for the military.
And I guess the question, were you in recovery or were you using and drinking in those days?
I was usually drinking at the time.
Army, you were probably...
As much as possible without getting in trouble. I did actually really well compared to many of my fellow soldiers. I don't know how, but I really did excel. But yeah, there's a thing about soldiers who go off to battle when they come home. All the problems. I believe that out of my platoon, I can't remember the exact number of my platoon. I think it was something like 32, 33 members of my platoon. There were 27 who were married when they went over, and all were divorced within the year.
Oh.
So that gives you some indication of the kind of change in your mindset that goes on when you're exposed to real battle. And it also talks to the trauma that my work aims at addressing.
Yeah, I can imagine. And when was you might say rock bottom for you? At what point? And when was the turning around, or as they say in Gnosticism, the metanoia, the turning back or looking at the plural?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, my rock bottom actually did not get me into recovery, but it did stop me from using cocaine, which was a major source of problems. And around the year 2000, I was working in Chiapas, in the southernmost state of Mexico at the time. And I was using a lot of substances, alcohol a lot. I was doing, I was doing a lot of things. Cocaine was one of the big ones. I had some quite mystical experiences, which I don't know if I really want to detail today or not. But what the end result was that I ended up getting divorced, losing a house that was paid for, and losing my job in Central America, all within the matter of days. I was at a terrible point as far as I felt like I was, caught between Scylla and Charybdis, and I didn't know quite where to turn. So I ended up moving to Phoenix, Arizona. Like I said, I didn't have a job. So I took up a job with consumer safety out there, a nonprofit organization. But I also worked at this, in a museum reproduction store in a mall, and I felt like that was one of the greatest refuges of my life, where I could be surrounded by the art of all ages, every day, even though, I mean, some of the reproductions weren't great and, they weren't the original, but it really allowed me some time to heal. Not enough time because I had to go back into action as soon as the towers fell in 2001, working both for the Red Cross and Greenpeace. And then I had some more of those allegorical experiences that I don't know whether I should really relate or not.
Yeah, you can, or we can do it for another time.
Well, I'll give you like kind of the allegorical thing was that a friend of mine, Matthew, thought he could move rocks with his mind alone. And I had to show him that the way to move a rock was you pick the rock up and you carry it to where you need it to go. Now, I don't doubt that someday Matthew will be able to move rocks with his mind alone. But it's not the kind of power that you give to children, so that's what I would say about that.
Yeah, I'm sure through my addiction, obviously there were, you might say, supernatural events, mystic insights and all that, but it still didn't, you might say, tame the beast. And even though the divine was right there and like there was beauty and art in the world, I just didn't want to see it. I just wanted to, again, feed this demon that was inside of me until I guess one day I said, I can't take it anymore. And I did something I rarely did. I asked for help and I laid my cards down on the table and said, this is what I've become, a shell of what I once was, and everything that as a kid I did not want to be, I became, and I don't want to be that anymore. I don't want to lower my standards anymore. I can't do it.
Right. I hear you. And as you know, as a fellow active person in recovery, hearing other stories like that is actually so essential to spiritual growth. Hearing the reality that people speak and not this front that they put on. Mm-hmm. I just speaking a little bit about my own process of coming into AA. What had happened after got to Phoenix, which, by the way, Phoenix is one of the hot spots for esoteric people in this country. There's a lot happening in Phoenix. It's below the surface. And it's where I learned a lot about the Golden Dawn, actually.
Wow.
So anyway, I was in Phoenix, but I was, I was bored with my job. Like I said, it was consumer safety. It was important, but it also was boring to me. So I started taking classes at Scottsdale Community College and Arizona State University there. And they were very eclectic. They were basically just picking out things I wanted to learn more about. But one of those ended up being a behavioral neuroscience class. And it was with a man named Eddie Castaneda. And he required a term paper like a lot of classes do. So I actually chose to write about brain-computer interface. Now, I started reading these articles and realized I didn't understand a thing that they were saying. I didn't understand the language. So I went to Eddie and I said, is there anyone here at Arizona State who can help me understand these papers? And she gave me two names, but the only one that responded back was a man named Stephen Helms Tillery. And he said, sure, come by during office hours and I'll help you with this. And so I did. And I thought that he would give me maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on who else was at office. You know how that goes. But we spoke for well over 2 hours. And I realized as I left his office that I wanted to find a way to quit my job, come back to school, work in his lab, and get a whole nother degree. Which, by the way, up till that time, my first degree was in political science from the Ohio State University. Mm-hmm. So I did. I came back, did work on research on the pre-shaping of the hand as it moves into grasp things. And I got another degree. It was very different kind of path, but it ended up being in psychology for several reasons. And I ended up getting really my pick of grad schools, wherever I wanted to really go amongst the ones I applied for. And the one I chose was Brown University, to work under the great John Donahue, who is probably the world's leading expert. There's some debate. There'd be debate on this question, but in my mind, he's the world's greatest expert on brain-computer interface and what goes into that. So I got to work directly under him. But in the first year of grad school there, I had broken up with a partner in Phoenix, an MD. She was a doctor on one of the local Indian reservations. So I broke up with her, and she had kind of been a bit of a steady rock for me during those times. But without her, I found myself going right back into drinking extremely heavily, lots of blackouts. And by February of my first year there, I knew that if I didn't make a serious move in a serious direction, I was going to lose a new relationship that I was in, and B, I would probably be kicked out of grad school.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was when I went into AA, was at that point.
No rehab, just AA? Start going to meetings?
Just AA. I'm a one-chip wonder. As soon as I went in, I've never drank past that time.
That's great. That is really great to hear. Yeah, I think what we were talking about, and you've mentioned too, Lachlan, is I was in an interview in a podcast recently, and I said, recovery like gnosis isn't recovery gnosis unless you give it away. I mean, you have to share it with the world. You have to help others, human beings. If you tell somebody don't drink, don't do drugs like our parents did, we're not going to listen. But if we share our stories, because our minds are made of stories, and we enter the realm of allegory and symbol, we will reach others, and you show our humanity and our humility and how we needed help. And in a way, we show how strong we are. Just as when I would go to meetings or rehab, I was in awe by others who, would tell me of just be so transparent about what happened, horrors, what they did, and how I can relate to, and ultimately how they found a way out.
Yeah, it's very interesting of how AA actually bears a lot of similarities to Crowley's AA. There are a lot of deep similarities between these pathways, while they superficially may look quite different on the surface. And as we know, the AA from Crowley is passed, almost like from a sponsor to a sponsee, who there will also sponsor, So yeah, it's a very interesting correspondence between those two things. But the thing about AA is that, and I know that we're talking about it somewhat openly, but generally in society as a large, you don't talk about your work in AA. You don't. That has to remain beneath the surface, and in this way, it's in some ways similar to some of the Rosicrucian ideals. Of going into the world and doing good, without expectations that it's going to make you famous, or that you're going to get rich, or anything else from the process of just doing good deeds for real in the world anonymously. That's the kind of thing that is it's great to study. I'll say this: it's great to study a lot of the esoteric literature. But if all you do is study the esoteric literature, you will not get gnosis. You have to make this an active part of your life, and yes, that's really all I got to say about that subject. But just the importance of you becoming a literal soldier in some ways, maybe not military soldier, but just a soldier for your own private truth in the world, cannot be overstated. So yeah.
Yeah, well said. I agree with you. 100%. And as researchers like Mitch Horowitz have shown, AA is just another secret society in American occult practice. It is esoteric. It is not. It's not scientific. It's not really psychological. It has a strong bent for metaphysics, or at the very least, an inner symbolic life. Obviously, there are atheist AA meetings, but again, they're playing a story. They're in the world of symbols and images and archetypes. And so, as you said, AA helped you, and then later on, or more recent in your life, Lachlan, you joined Recovery Dharma.
That's correct. Yeah. So Recovery Dharma is a Buddhist-based program, and it's different than AA in that there is no one singleness of purpose. Anyone with any type of addiction can be there. Anyone, even like people who almost like an Al-Anon kind of thing. If you have addiction in your family, you can be there. Yeah, I mean, anyone can be there. There's really no one kicked out of a meeting in Recovery Dharma, or, there's no like criteria to go into it. Now, it broke off of a group called Refuge, and it broke off because the person who founded Refuge, who had treatment centers, ended up sleeping with one of his patients.
Ouch.
Right.
Never happened before with groups. Never happened.
Never, ever.
Didn't happen with the Beatles.
Yeah, never, ever. Yeah, no, I mean, but the point being is that while this is understandable from a human level, right? It's understandable what happened. If you're going to be a leader of an organization like that, you have to put yourself beyond reproach. Right. And if you don't, you're going to end up losing half the people who follow you or more. I don't have any idea what the percentage who went to Recovery Dharma is, but it's not insignificant. And I would never go to Refuge because of that. Because I just wouldn't. I wouldn't engage.
Yeah, it's a very hard choice, and it's very complex, and sometimes we all want to simplify the world in light and dark and easy answers, but there's not, and the decisions affect us for a long time. It could affect others, and I guess you just do the best you can.
Right, and I guess what I should have emphasized there is that I don't have anything against people continuing to go to Refuge. It's just that Noah's action there, Noah Levin's action there, makes it impossible for me, with my value system, to do that, because I've never slept with a patient.
Right? Yeah, I can't even.
Never. So while I understand it, it just, I can't engage personally within it because of my personal value system.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do. I think at least in AA, you have the choice. If you don't like a meeting, I've known meetings where people were stealing from the coffers, people were 13th stepping, people. You just go to another meeting. That's the beauty about an anarchist satellite movement with satellites is that you could just move away.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, all of the times that I've been tempted in a meeting to 13th step. And initially I was, let me see how I can put this. In my first year in AA, I was letting myself be 13th stepped a number of times. Right. Now I did shortly after that, shortly after I got a year, I believe it was April of going into my second year, I actually we're now divorced, but I met my second wife. I'd known her, but we actually kind of really met, I'd say. It's weird kind of trying to describe it, right? But she was, like me, a Unitarian Universalist, very active within it. And what was interesting was that our traumas matched in some very important ways. As you know, like my deep expertise beyond the neural correlates of movement is with trauma processing. So it was a very we shared that. We shared being in UU, and that provided enough of a connection, to make it really strong. But I actually forgot kind of where I'm going with this, Miguel.
Yeah, we're talking about the messy.
The messy
human relationships are always messy.
How it's bad. Well, we once I met her, there was no more 13th stepping for me. There was no more of an engagement. Now, I actually had to go into the dirty little secret organization, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, not because I was physically acting out, but because I kept on putting women other than my wife in my mind when I was having, relationship, with her. So that took me over 2 years of weekly work and step work within SLAA to actually stop having thoughts about other women. And so we split this last June. I was successful in not thinking about another woman from that time in 2014 until March of this year, right as the coronavirus was starting to hit heavily. And I thought about this woman. She reminded me of some of my past lovers so much. It felt almost like fire was burning in our eyes, although we didn't touch. And I went right out and I crashed my truck. I've never had another auto accident.
Wow.
But I completely wrecked my truck right after that. And not complete. It wasn't totaled. The other car was totaled. But yeah, it was kind of one of those things. It was like boom, and it hit hard, and I just was not in this world at that point, because I just violated my SLAA sobriety, which I'd had some pride in. I was prideful about the fact that I could manage this, and then it had been taken away from me, by that. So
yeah, what do they say in recovery? One of the worst things an alcoholic can say is, "I got this."
Yeah,
we're gonna drop the ball.
Exactly. Well,
regardless of how much sobriety we have.
Yeah, I've never said that about alcohol. I've never said that about cocaine, but I think I said it about sex.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, these addictions are, again, they manifest in different ways. So, and these days, Lachlan, you are in no longer in Arizona, and you are teaching at various rehabs, right?
Well, that's actually a good point. I'm in Asheville, North Carolina. And so until just quite recently, I was teaching at a number of places around the area, and I was on staff at another place where I was the director of recovery, education, and innovation. And it was at that place, which I am not at liberty to actually give the name of, where I developed most of my classwork that I took to the other programs in the area. Well, beginning in October, due to COVID, several of them started deciding that they couldn't have me in anymore.
No.
And just because they were not allowing any outside visitors really on their premises. And so in October, I lost a little over $1,000 of income. November, it happened even more so. And then because I I don't know how deeply to go in this subject, but I started another very intensive relationship with someone for the first time since I divorced my wife back in June. And then things went completely sour. And I mean, I knew I had my part in it, but it went just really sour. And there was all this financial pressure on me. By that point, I'd lost about $2,500 in income per month in classes. And I just kind of broke down. I needed help. I went to the VA and checked myself in, and said, right now I need care. I'm just not thinking rationally at this point. And that worked out. But the place that I was director of education, they work on a complete shoestring. There is really no profit coming in. It's just barely getting it to work on a month-to-month basis there, which is why I was working for $15 an hour, because that's what they could afford to pay me. I made a lot more from the other classes. I'll put it that way, right? The other classes were minimum $100 an hour. But I went at this one place where I was developing a lot of my coursework. I was doing it for 15. So they couldn't afford to pay me, while I was in, and they had to get someone else on staff. And so I lost that position as well, which was roughly $2,000 a month. So now we're talking well over $4,000 a month that I've lost. And I'm trying several ways to really replace some of that income, and none of them are working so far. None of them are, and there's various reasons. So one that I'd really hoped that would go somewhere. By the way, I still have my VA check, which isn't tiny, but it's also not nearly enough to meet my financial needs on a monthly basis. But one of the things that I've done for governmental teams, corporate teams, or foreign government teams in a few cases, is build things that are called alternate reality games. Okay, so this is, I think maybe a fair amount of people have heard of it. If you haven't heard about it, please go and look it up on Wikipedia or something. I don't really want to go into a real extensive description. But just to say, these are things where you kind of start placing clues on the internet in various places. Usually it's the internet. It can be other places too, including like graffiti on a bridge, or number of things like kind of in the real world, maybe almost like you have a Blair Witch Project kind of thing that you take somebody through or something, right? So it can be anything like that, and it's used mostly to connect people who will make great teammates with each other. So you might design this to open up the game to about 100 people, but what you're really looking for is 5 or 6 to fill a team, right? So you do all kinds of obscure clues, both on the internet and in the real world, and you let people find each other through this, and just kind of trust in the goddess that they will, right? And so I've designed numerous ones of these over the years. Never in my own name. This has always been anonymous. And this is the first time I'm actually putting out an ARG in my own name. Now, I'm pulling from a number of sources for it to have what we would call maybe the exoteric story that is given to everyone through it. But the game relates to like Robert Jordan. I don't know if you read his Wheel of Time series.
A long time ago, of course, a classic.
Yeah. Game of Thrones. It relates to Game of Thrones. It relates to video games like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy. But these are kind of the source work for the game on the surface. Now, beneath the surface, it's about marrying transhumanism to the mystical. And it's ultimately, it's about giving the demiurge companionship, so he isn't quite as crazy through the creation of unchained AI that loves humanity.
Love it.
So that's kind of the story. But I've had this page up. I've linked it so many times through both Twitter and Facebook for people saying, please, give $3, give $5, give $12 if you'd like, or even 23 or 33, but here I've been busting my ass on this game to produce it for everyone. And all I've got so far are people who want to play for free. You've probably experienced similar things with your Patreon. You're trying to put out a weekly show. You give away a fair portion of your show every week so anyone can listen to it. And yet many people do, and then they don't become Patreons of you. Well, I've experienced to the point that I have nobody's given any money for it yet.
But did they get to try the game, or how does it? I don't know how it is with games.
Anyone can try it. They can look up my page on Facebook. It's just Lachlan Franquemont, the same person. I don't have anything to hide. I'm transparent. Well, no, that's a lie, Miguel. I'm not fully transparent.
No, but
there's a lot of stuff that's happening on the dark web and in other places. But anyone can open themselves up to the game through the transparent portal of Facebook or Twitter, on what I do on those two sites.
Sorry to hear about the issues. Yeah, 2020, there was a lot of changes, but it also gives people opportunity to sort of explore new dimensions of themselves. And I hope things work out for you. I mean, you're a Renaissance man. You're a scholar. You have a PhD. You're an artist. So, and sometimes it takes a while to engage. It took a long. I don't know if it took a long time for people to engage with my podcast, or just the veil started lifting and people started realizing, these are very Gnostic times. Maybe this small podcaster, but it will happen, I'm sure. And of course, we will have links on the page here if people want to check out your work, Lachlan. And for the audience, some of the things you taught was maybe so the audience can see, as always, part of finding Hermes is that people understand there are more options than what we think, even if we talk a lot about AA. But you taught transformational recovery. Could you share what that is?
That was one of 3 courses I taught. It was the primary one and the longest ones. Transformational recovery. I guess I should back up and say why I determined it was why I first started researching. And it was that I saw so many people who just did not resonate with AA. And for a number of them, they found the God talk overbearing, which I do not. I find it like there actually probably isn't enough mentions of God in many AA meetings out there. But some people, it's that kind of thing. Others, they almost think it's a cult or something, we've
heard it all. Yes.
Yeah, we've heard it all of why it doesn't work. So I tried to put together a program that would, really kind of take things from a bit of a different direction. Now, so it basically looks at a person's mindset. It looks at their engagement with flow states, if you know what a flow state is. So a flow state is where your prefrontal decreases activation in the brain, and you're working mostly just on instinct. If you've ever been a good sports player, or maybe a chess master, or even like if you've been to a rave or a sporting event, you've experienced flow, the point where you're just kind of you're in the zone. And I'll look at things within it, like what were your sources of flow before you came into addiction? Maybe you were a musician who loved to sit around in the studio, or just with your friends and play music and get it that way. And then your friend moved away and the band broke up, or you went on the road for several weeks and playing the same songs and got bored with them. And what is the reason you first started to get addicted?
Right.
What and then it's not only about engaging those past sources of flow, but learning to engage with a lot more of them too. For instance, right now I'm trying to pick up synthesizers through GarageBand on my Mac computer. Is very different from anything that I've ever done in the past. There's a very steep learning curve, but that's actually how I know that this is going to really add something to my repertoire, is by going into steep learning curves on things. So that's the other part, is engage with the flow states that you used to have, and find new ones. If you've never been to a rave, and you think you can handle going to one without engaging in drugs and alcohol, or let me back up. Some people can engage with drugs and alcohol. This is kind of an a thing of individual. But if you are in recovery, right, before you go to a rave, make sure you are solid, right? Oh. But it's not that you're barred from going to a rave. You just cannot do so if you are not solid. I don't know how perfectly to put that, but you in recovery, you can go into bars if you need to, if you're solid. I had a business meeting in a casino yesterday with someone, and I had no fear going in there because I trust in my higher power. I trust that they're not going to let me be tempted in an inappropriate way. It was fine. I met for about an hour with a potential angel investor. And then I played, video poker for about an hour and made $2.45 on the nickel machine. Mm-hmm. So, and compared to lately, that was a high paying hour for me. So it's everywhere but the VA. That would be, the VA compensates me entirely appropriately for my work, but
good to hear.
No more, no less. But anyway, I don't. What I was saying is that if you are solid, you can put yourself into a lot of situations that others would judge as being quite risky. But the point of all this is to get you to the point where you are solid enough that you can take risk. Yesterday I went to a beautiful waterfall also on the way to the casino. It was a double waterfall with one fall coming in at a 90-degree angle from the other, called Soco Falls. It's on the Cherokee Indian Reservation here in North Carolina. Cool. So I went to the waterfall. Extremely treacherous getting down. There was a lot of ice. It was muddy where there wasn't ice. And I made my way down to the bottom. And there were two guys down there doing sword forms at the base of the waterfall with wooden swords. Amazing, right? Their names were Dirk and Justin. I didn't get their last names, but they were Dirk and Justin, who were doing sword forms, underneath Soco Falls. And I thought that was very interesting. Now I advise several groups of people not to try to descend, because Dirk and Justin know how to appropriately judge the risk, and we have the skills to do these kind of things. But if you're like those two girls from Florida or that family up at the top, you don't need to be going to the base of a waterfall like this. You could die. Now, if you did die in that, you probably would be rewarded in the next life. But you got to make that kind of determination. Are you ready to go? Are you ready to go?
That is true. Another thing you taught too, I want to get to, is stimulus response wedges. Yeah. What is that, Lachlan?
So this is based primarily on the work of a man named Scott Carney, who actually wrote the book, The Wedge. Yeah, stimulus response wedge, primarily based on the work of Scott Carney. Scott Carney first started going into this world through a man named Wim Hof. He's known as the Iceman. He's got a number of Guinness Book World Records for like ice exposure, swimming under the ice. He almost climbed Everest in a pair of shorts.
Wow.
For getting, so this is Wim Hof. He's Wim also on a yearly basis climbs Mount Kilimanjaro with a group of people going in just over 30 hours to the top, which is before he did it with a group of like 14, I think. I forget the exact number. That's an approximate number. Nobody thought it could be done. They thought, no, you have to adjust to the altitude. You have to go little by little, But using Wim's breathwork method and practicing breathwork on a consistent basis, you can climb mountains without having to stop at each little level as you go up.
Right.
Interestingly enough, my other class is called The Five Mountains. It's based on Commander Mark Devine, who's a SEAL commander, ex-SEALs commander. But anyway, so going back to Scott Carney and the wedge. So this is learning various ways to put a wedge between the stimuli, adverse stimuli, and maladaptive responses you might have. So anyway, we start off with some of the basics, the ones that almost anyone would suspect on something like this: exercise, meditation, breath work. Mm-hmm. Big three. You need to be working out on a consistent basis, be doing many different types of workouts, do workouts not only for strength, but for cardio, balance, coordination, weapons forms. You need to try to mix in as many of these different types of styles as you can in your exercise plan. 2, breath work. So I get breath work routines from numerous sources. I think the 2 biggest would be from Wim Hof and from Laird Hamilton, actually, who's a famous pro surfer. Has a program called XPT, where you can get a lot of very advanced breath work programs and start practicing them. Several of them will freak you out. All the guys that I worked with, when I saw them freak out, it was usually doing Laird Hamilton breathwork routines, because they can be so intense. I've designed a number of breath work routines myself. They usually are not as harsh as Laird's, because I'm actually trying to get them to enter altered states that are almost like drug-free LSD trips. There's actually a guy named Groff who was a transpersonal psychologist who actually originally did this. And I don't use his techniques. I use my own techniques, primarily because his techniques take 3 hours, and I just don't have that kind of time to give people on this kind of thing. So I designed a number of my own that took off on that. So the last main sources of the breath work is a woman from LA named Michelle D'Avalia. I've never met, but I've been a member on and off for her Patreon kind of stuff. But she deals with deep emotional processing through breath work. And I would recommend some of her stuff too. It's not the LSD kind of breath work type of stuff. And again, this is not literally LSD. This is just getting high on your own supply of air, anyway, she deals much more in the emotional processing. And the way I tell guys is that, and there are other sources of this too, but primarily with her, you're getting almost the female side of breath work. And with me or Laird Hamilton or, the Groff based stuff, Well, actually, broth may tip into the feminine energy too, now that I think about it. But anyway, through me and Laird Hamilton, our breath work is very much the male-centered breath work. If you were playing a game like Final Fantasy, you have like the white mage or the healers, and you've got the black mages, which are the damage dealers to the enemies. And if you want to play a white mage healer, you're going to learn techniques that deal with meditation, most standard meditation, focused meditation, mindfulness meditation, and breath work that comes from a feminine energy side that is dealing with your emotional processing. Now, if you want to do the black mage stuff, you need to deal with the more masculine energies out there. Now, this can be things like energized meditation through Christopher Hyatt, who was in the esoteric community out in Phoenix when I was. Or you can do breath work, such as my own style stuff, which I'll have to put on the web someday, but maybe not right away. Or Laird Hamilton's stuff. If you really want that kind of energy, be prepared. It's not for everyone.
Lastly, you have also experienced or taught integral theory by, I believe that's from Ken Wilber.
Yeah, that's correct. So actually, the courses, Ken Wilber is a secondary source for the Five Mountains. The first source is Commander Mark Divine,
right?
Who's he's created his own yoga. He's created, he's really a Renaissance man too. Completely. So I'm actually doing 15 minutes of training with him each day right now through the computer. But his principle is the Five Mountains. For him, it's that you first start working the physical. You get your body in shape. You learn to make your body do things that you didn't think it could do before. All right. And then you move on to the mental challenges. These are the things of just learning, how to access exceptional processing states, and that kind of thing. And once you do that, you can move into the emotional. Now, I've spoken earlier about some of the sources of finding ways to process your emotions in productive ways, but they're definitely out there. So, then you learn from that. If you've learned to process your emotions, you move into the intuitive. And within the intuitive, you stop being bounded by a lot of the rules that, let's say, the mundane population believes are, hard and fast rules. You move into being able to know things that, that without knowing how you know them, and being able to act on that. And then the fifth mountain is where you bring all these stages together in what he calls the kokoro. So the Five Mountains is kind of interesting because while I give the background to the guys who take it, unlike the other classes where I have, PowerPoints and I'm going I'm trying to get lots of conversation, but it is a little bit more formalized in their design. The Five Mountain class could, I guess, theoretically run as long as you wanted it to. I've never had it run more than 6 weeks. Anyway, though, all I'm doing is kind of sitting up with a whiteboard and some markers, and an eraser, and bringing up things that do, each class may relate to things from integral theory or, Five Mountain, or other sources too. They're not the only ones. There's DBT. Yeah, if you've heard of dialectic behavioral therapy, there's some other kind of sources that I might, at the right moment, kind of pull out, depending on how the conversation's going. So you just get people with kind of a base amount of all right, this is how this game is going to be played as we go through this class. Here are a few basic things to think about as we go forward. But that's interesting too, of how much you can learn by playing games with others. These can be video games. These can be games like chess, Risk, the old board game. I've got a few other, board games in my house from World of Warcraft and Game of Thrones. Of course, there's chess. Here's an interesting thing. I've never actually been very good at chess because I'm always playing in 7 dimensions instead of 2. And it doesn't translate very well to a 2-dimensional board. So I always struggle with chess because of that.
Awesome. Well, yeah, very interesting. And again, for the audience, lots of choices out there. What speaks to you? Breath work is always important, and being in good shape is important. But
yeah, hey, before we leave on that, actually, just another important things that you should work for the wedge. Cold thermogenesis, expose your body to the cold on a regular basis. I'm not right now, but for most of this year, I was taking an ice bath every day.
Yeah, that's what the entrepreneurs do. They
exactly
take a cold shower in the morning, and
that's right, exactly. It's been cold enough around here lately that I haven't needed the ice bath. I just get right out into nature in a pair of shorts and a shirt, and do it that way by using the cold that is actually in the air. So, but I'll go back to ice baths when it warms up around here. You do heat shock protein. This is where you expose yourself to saunas or sweat lodges, other sources where you're really going to have to deal with the heat and make your body produce more heat shock protein. So another thing is CO2 tolerance. This is something you work through the breath work, but there's several styles of breath work that push your CO2 tolerance to a much greater extent. So once we have it there, you expose yourself to fear. Say if you are climbing, if you have a fear of heights, learning to climb boulders or maybe a climbing wall at the gym or join a gym that has one is an excellent source of working on a fear in a productive way. And you'll have to judge by your own fears what are the safe methods to work on those fears, right? We don't want to put somebody who has massive fears around an event in a non-safe environment, right? But I would challenge that most fears that you have out there are ways that you can safely engage in them. Another one is pain. I get my backs waxed on a regular basis to give a source of pain. I roll my IT band with foam rollers, which is painful. Neither of these are mutilation or bad or going to last or anything like that.
My wife started that instead of yoga. Those spike things, she rolls on them to help her back.
Yeah.
It's
exactly. But yeah, exposing yourself and learning to recontextualize pain, and then the final step is, and I don't know how deep to go into this one, but is edging your orgasms. Learning to find the keys to go a lot longer, either alone or with partners. And so those are all good things to work on for a stimulus response wedge.
Awesome. That's all great advice. I'm definitely going to look into, I have my own breath routines, but to know there's a whole constellation of those will be very helpful. Well, awesome. Well, we're at the end. Lachlan, I'd like to thank you very much for coming on Finding Hermes, and I will have links to your work on the show notes. Probably I will have them scrolling right now as we speak, but really appreciate you being here, taking your time, and good luck with all your projects.
Sure. And if anyone else wants me on another podcast, just contact me.
Yes. He can spend a whole hour on each of the subjects we had today, but we wanted to give an appetizer to individuals so you can find your Hermes and go inward to find out your purpose and who you really are. Well, thank you, Luck.
Absolutely. All right. Bye now.
And there you have it. A fascinating interview with Lachlan. As I keep saying and I keep repeating, it is my hope that you find that information to walk through the doors you need to walk through. With Hermes, the god of the mind. Nothing new except, a bit of a pause since our last Finding Hermes, and I apologize. Holidays, traveling, sick kids, other things just created more of a gap than I wanted, but there will be more, and the show must go on. The gnosis must go on. Certainly an important theme. Well, several important themes I want to address, and something that I keep repeating, and Lachlan certainly echoes this, is that depression is a wake-up call, and other darker feelings mean your worldview must die. These events, these feelings, these conditions are information. I think once you address it or couch it in terms that it is information coming from within at many times, it makes a difference. So the destruction that you might feel within you simply means you have to go inward into the unconscious and bring some transformative energies to, again, destroy your worldview and alchemically create a new worldview. Very important, very necessary. And once we're aligned with our psyche, with our soul, with the gods, then our higher purpose manifests and things are more harmonious. Trust me, I've been there so many times and will be there sooner rather than later. The other themes I wanted to talk about, and believe it or not, I had already made the decision to address these, but Lachlan covered both of them. The first one is the idea of expecting the outer world to make a difference in your life. As I've said, your heroes and villains are simply your excuses. And I am quoting the great book, Eyes Wide Open, and I admire the author, Isaac Litsky. But yes, your heroes and villains are your excuses, your shortcomings. And don't expect a savior to come down and change your world. We make the mistake of reducing the world to good and bad guys, and more often than not, they're simply projections. Yes, of course, there are objectively good things and bad things that happen in our lives, but the battle is won within. The battle is won inside of us. When I started doing that or taking that position, life got much better. And I should mention, too, that we often do stress release or negative energy relief techniques. That can be the Sedona method, exercising, meditation, the Tibetan Tonglen meditation, and other things to release stress and negative energy and so forth. But it's important you do that for positive things in your life. I know that sounds strange, but the ego can get inflated if we're not careful. And at the end of the day, we always want to be in a state of no karma, in a state of stoic sensibility, where we are not just the eye of the storm, but we are the calm in the storm. We are in the liminal, in those middle places where our soul can thrive better and we can see the world with our third eye. It's all fun and games until someone loses a third eye, and then it's just gnosis. That's a saying from Aeon Byte. Thought I'd bring it up. But yes, I have found that when releasing positive things within me, it's actually better. In fact, let me read something for you that I wrote. This goes to Jung's Black books that were recently released, and he talks about really his view on Abraxas, and he sees Abraxas as arrows, basically that binding force of the universe that brings everything together, but is also destructive. It is how the material world basically stays together and evolves and life goes on. But of course, this force, it makes everything very temporal until us, and it will destroy us in the end as it brought us to this life. But anyway, Jung talks about how to deal with the force of Abraxas. I guess you could call it Shakti if you don't want to call it arrows. And Jung says, you will have a dreadful trouble getting clear of Abraxas. So remember him, do not worship him, but also do not imagine that you can flee him since he is all around you. You must be in the middle of life, surrounded by death on all sides, stretched out like one crucified. You hang in him, the fearful, the overpowering. So you get what I'm saying? To be in the middle of the storm that is Abraxas, to be stoic and, as Jung's saying, sort of crucified, where you are no longer in the material world and really still not in the spiritual world. You are in the middle, very much as some have interpreted the death of Jesus or the crucifixion of Jesus. And it's interesting, too, that going to Star Wars, of all places, if you look at the theology or metaphysics of the Sith, they use the Force to escape the Force, to be out of karma, out of the wheel of time and space. So think about, again, not being attached to the positive as you are not attached to the negative, and releasing both. The second theme I wanted to talk about is the idea of good deeds, doing good deeds. And I would suggest that when you do good deeds, you don't tell anybody about them. And yes, it's something I started doing maybe 5 years ago, pretty much 90% of the time. And it kills me. Well, it killed me at the beginning. I mean, we want attention, right? We want the world to see that we've done good. But I think that actually harms our ego. Remember, as I've been saying on this podcast or show, whatever you want to call it, is that we need strong egos, unlike what New Agers and others have said, and some Eastern philosophies of no ego. No, we need strong egos to be able to undertake and absorb the forces, the communication that are coming from within us, as well as have the authority to handle the outside material world. That's the job of the ego. And I have found that when you do good deeds and don't tell anybody, the ego gets stronger, because there's always the danger of attention and accolades and other things, basically either bloating your ego or creating sort of complexes that can confuse the ego. Furthermore, if you do good deeds without telling somebody, the ego will find that doing good becomes automatic. It does what it does, and it's what it should be. And in that sort of automatic existence, it finds strength, and you find more space to pursue other avenues of the psyche. So yes, and this can be, well, something as simple as you do something good and you don't come home that night and tell your spouse or significant other that you did something great, like finding a wallet and giving it to the person, or you go on a GoFundMe and you make sure that you are anonymous. You simply give to give because it's the right thing. And in the end, it will strengthen your ego, and that will allow better energies to flow through you. So as always, you can find your higher purpose or continue forward with your higher purpose. Go through those doors, my friends, with Hermes, the god of the mind. So those are the themes I wanted to touch upon. And again, we will have some new Finding Hermes coming soon. I hope you have enjoyed it. Please leave comments or let me know what parts of the show you like. Do you like my commentary? Do you like the guests? Do you suggest some themes or guests that you might have? I love your feedback, and I truly appreciate the support you have given me on this venture. And to repeat myself again, I hope it helps you walk through those doors, lay your cards on the table, and become transparent to the transcendent. Thank you.